Astronauts, something incomprehensible and inexplicable near the ship, meaning German racial research and education, about 3,500 years ago experienced its golden age. Ancient voices, screams, and telegraph notification sounds had encountered the most terrifying serial killer in world history. First in the corridor, 5 to 6 weeks later for the cameras, Igor Dyatlov is in charge. KGB is like water, adapting to its surroundings the claim that the issue of a person traveling in time is a resolvable issue theory. Do you think you'll ever be queen? No, I don't. No. Why do you think that? I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts and people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country. August 31st, 1997. The first lights of the morning. In a tunnel in Paris, the world lost a princess. The British public received the news as soon as they woke up. Televisions cut their broadcasts. Crowds began to gather in front of the palace. The first flowers were left on the roads. As tears streamed silently, no one knew what to say. This death was the end of an era. A woman had settled in people's hearts far beyond the palace's boundaries, and now she was gone. In her final years, she may no longer have been a princess, but in the public's eyes, she was much more. That morning, this news first spread on the streets of Paris. Then it reached London. Then the whole world. Princess Diana had died in a traffic accident. It wasn't even 4 o'clock yet. In the darkness of the tunnel in Paris, a car was mangled. The first news agency report said injured. Then the news of her critical condition came. Then they fell silent. Within a few minutes, television screens all over the world turned black. The BBC anchor could not hold back his tears. Thousands of people in England had not even woken up yet, but Diana was gone. The front of Kensington Palace was silent before dawn. The first flower was left at the door by a child. Then a woman came. Then a man. A country had begun to mourn before it woke up. The palace was silent. The royal family made no official statement. Flags were not lowered. No one was talking. The public, on the other hand, could not find a word to say. Some cried silently. Some knelt and prayed. Others yelled with anger. Why was she alone? Why was she not protected? Why so young? Such mourning had never been seen before in the history of England. The streets filled, flowers overflowed, people were silent. But this silence was a test for the monarchy. And that morning, Prime Minister Tony Blair stood before the cameras. The tremble in his voice turned to the crowds with anger and said, "She was the people's princess, and she will remain so." Princess Diana's story is seen by many as the most tragic Cinderella tale in the real world. Perhaps this is why Diana is not foreign to many of us. A young girl, a palace, a prince, a wedding, and a dazzling dress. But in this tale, the princess was left alone. The ball didn't end that night. In this story, the slipper didn't drop. The fairy tale couldn't end happily. It was left unfinished by a tragedy. And now we return to where that tale began. Diana Frances Spencer was born on the morning of July 1st, 1961, at Park House in Sandringham, Norfolk. She was the fourth child of the family. She had 2 sisters and 1 brother. The house where she was born was right next to Queen Elizabeth I's private estate, so Diana was born in the shadow of royalty. Contrary to popular belief, her story was not a tale of a common girl who married into the palace from outside. The Spencer lineage was one of the most rooted and powerful lines of the English aristocracy, so much so that in some periods they were seen not as a loyal ally to the royal family, but as a direct rival. Thus, Diana's past was not only noble, it was also connected to the palace by blood. Diana and Prince Charles were 9th-degree cousins. Both descended from a nobleman named William Cavendish who lived in the 17th century. The origin of Diana's mother, Frances Roche, goes back even further, to many former kings and queens such as Charles II. Thanks to these connections, she had the opportunity to meet the royal circle as a child. Due to the location of her family's house, she played games with Prince Andrew and Prince Edward during holidays. Even at a younger age, she was around the palace, but never fully inside it. Perhaps that is what made her so human, so fragile, and so relatable. She was very close to the palace, but always remained outside it, and that is why she would become the most human figure within those cold walls. In the house where Diana was born, silence was much stronger than the ornate corridors. The Spencer family, from the outside, seemed to represent nobility, splendor, and order. But the inside of the house was not like that. The relationship between her mother and father began to deteriorate when Diana was very young. Frances Roche had never found true harmony with her husband Edward Spencer, who was older than her. The conflicts, arguments, and estrangement between them were all the breakups Diana witnessed at an early age. When Diana was 6 years old, her mother left home. This was her first real disappointment. The door that closed behind her mother never truly closed for her. After that day, a feeling of permanent loneliness took root in Diana's life. She was raised by her father, but her longing for her mother always remained deep inside. This absence would show itself in the relationships she formed in the future. The family went to court. A custody battle began. Diana was caught right in the middle of processes too complex for a child to understand. When the court granted custody to her father, her mother moved away. One of the earliest wounds for a little girl is her mother no longer being home every morning. When her family acquired the title of Earl Spencer in 1975, Diana received the title of Lady. She was now officially noble, but behind that title was a withdrawn, silent, extremely shy girl trying to hide her emotions. She had difficulty expressing herself. She harbored deep emotions but could not find a language to express them. As a child, she loved ballet. The stage gave her the opportunity to express what she couldn't articulate through body language. But her family did not support her ballet career. Again, she was silent. Again, she retreated within herself. Diana initially received home education under the supervision of her governess, Gertrude Allen. In her school years, her teachers described her as sensitive, modest, and helpful. But she was not someone who easily stood out among her friends. She was a character who always stayed in the shadows, watched from afar, and kept silent when she felt something. And whatever she collected in all this silence, she would tell years later, looking into the eyes of millions of people. One of the Spencer family servants said years later, "Everyone spoke in that house, but Diana always listened. She didn't ask anything, but it was as if she knew everything." In another account, a classmate from little Diana's boarding school days described her as follows. She wanted to form deep bonds with people but was shy. It was as if she always lived in fear of being abandoned by someone she loved. But Diana also had a strong empathy inside her. She was skilled at sensing people's feelings. When she came across an animal in the street, she wouldn't pass without petting it. When a friend cried, she was one of the rare students who knew how to touch their shoulder. She had difficulty speaking but not feeling. In boarding school, she tried to do ballet again. Her teachers noticed her posture, grace, and the secret connection she had with the stage. But as she grew older, she grew taller, and her dream of becoming a professional ballerina was taken away from her on the grounds that she was too tall. She began her formal education at Silfield Private School in Norfolk Kingsley, and at the age of 9 transferred to Riddlesworth Hall School, a girls' boarding school near Tatford. Diana was an average student in her lessons. She was never at the top of her class. At the age of 12, she moved to Westheath Girls' School. In those years, she became even more withdrawn. Her shyness gradually turned into armor. Some teachers recognized her potential, but Diana's academic life never turned into a shining success. Her grades were insufficient in her final year. She failed twice. Her family sent her to a finishing school in Switzerland named Alpine Videminette. There, she received French education. She showed musical talent as a pianist. She also excelled in swimming and diving. She took training in tap dance and, although she couldn't become a ballerina, ballet dance training. She stayed in Switzerland for a while. She skied and was alone. In her own words, this loneliness gave her a sense of independence, and perhaps for the first time she tasted the feeling of, "I won't amount to anything there." When she returned to England, she did not attend any university, because her failing grades had made it impossible. But Diana was a young girl with high emotional, not academic, intelligence, and the first place she would show this was in a kindergarten classroom. Some days she told stories to children. Some days she knelt down on the floor and played with them. Diana's life was spent inside ordinary homes long before the palace corridors. After the Easter holiday, she left school and returned to London. In London, she shared her mother's apartment with two former school friends. She attended courses during the day and washed dishes in the evenings. She briefly took an advanced cooking course. She loved to dance, so she worked as a dance instructor for young people. But she had a ski accident and couldn't work for 3 months. After recovering, she found a job as a preschool assistant in a playgroup. She worked as a cleaner. She took on the role of hostess at parties. At that time, no newspaper knew her. Life was simple, challenging, but real. No one thought she would marry a prince in the future. She was already trying to reach people's hearts, not the palace, to be happy. And perhaps that is precisely why Charles noticed her. Still timid, a young girl who avoided even making eye contact in crowded environments. Diana first met Prince Charles in November 1977. She was only 16 at the time. Charles was 29. Diana's older sister, Lady Sarah, was seeing Charles at the time, and for Diana, this meeting was just a brief encounter. Neither love nor expectation. But time passed and things changed. The two met again at a country weekend event. This time Diana had grown up. She was still shy, but now she was attracting attention. And Charles began to see her as a potential wife for the first time that day. That day, Diana wore a blue floral dress. Charles probably wouldn't even remember that ordinary day later, but Diana kept every detail in her mind. Shortly after, Diana was invited to a private sailing trip held on the royal yacht Britannia. The invitation was unusual, because Charles wouldn't invite just anyone to such an event. But the invitation was not limited to that. She also received an invitation to Balmoral Castle, the royal family's summer residence in Scotland. That was the door to the heart of the dynasty. At Balmoral, Diana also met Charles's family. It was said that she was warmly welcomed by Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, and Queen Mother. The press was already ready to turn this relationship into a fairy tale. A young, beautiful, shy girl and a prince. In their first joint event, Diana shyly bowed her head in front of the journalists. The British press named her Shy Di. But no one knew what storms were raging in her inner world. Diana would say about that period, "When he started showing interest in me, I felt special. But then I realized that he loved the interest around me, not me inside." They became engaged in early 1981. Diana was only 20 years old. The British public was ready for the most romantic wedding story of the last century, but the answer given to that simple question asked at the press conference left a crack in the tale. The reporter asked, "Are you in love?" Diana nodded. But Charles, with a slight smile, said this, "Whatever in love means." At that moment, the camera was recording, but no one knew how this sentence would echo in Diana's heart for years. March 29, 1981. The wedding had not taken place yet. Diana was at Heathrow Airport to send off Prince Charles as he departed for a 5-week tour of Australia. She was wearing a red outfit, with a strange tension on her face. The press did not miss this scene. National Geographic captured the frame. They called it "Touching Farewell," as if it were the sorrow of love, as if it were the tears of separation. But something else had happened that day. Years later, Diana would recount that morning in her own voice. Those recordings, kept secret in the National Geographic archives, were opened years later, and it was understood that there was a completely different reason behind those tears. Diana had said, "That morning I was talking to Charles in the study. The phone rang about his trip. The caller was Camilla. Out of courtesy, I left the two of them alone. I left the room, but at that moment, my heart shattered. Camilla Shand, with her maiden name before marriage, was an aristocratic woman belonging to one of England's established families. She first met Charles in the early 1970s. The two had a brief romantic relationship, but Camilla was not considered a suitable wife for Charles at the time. In the eyes of the royal family, Camilla was too free-spirited to marry, had previous relationships, and was a woman who, according to the Queen, would not befit a future queen. For this reason, Charles was clearly made to feel that he should not marry her. Camilla later married Andrew Parker Bowles, but Charles never severed his ties with her. The infidelity had begun before the wedding. Even before her wedding dress was sewn, Diana sensed that something was wrong, but she couldn't speak up, because everyone expected her to remain silent. The press wrote headlines about her tears, but none of them wrote the correct headline. That headline should perhaps have been, "This fairy tale broke here." Years later, when the public learned what the scene that morning meant, anger grew, and Camilla Parker Bowles did not go down in history only as an ex-girlfriend. She became known as the homewrecker. Like a modern witch, the shadow of a broken tale. Newspapers wrote about her as the other woman. Interviews, columns, cartoons. Diana's tears were etched into memories. Camilla's silence became the target of public anger. And no matter how much Camilla tried to stay in the background, the echo of that morning's phone call never faded. That look of the young woman in the red dress at the airport was the first glass that shattered in the heart of an entire country. While the wedding dress was being sewn, something else was being stitched. A new identity. Because marrying into royalty was not a union with a person, but with a system. Months before the wedding date, Diana's life was no longer a freely flowing river, but a carefully drawn route. Where she would go, whom she would talk to, how she would sit, how she would laugh, what she would wear, everything was predetermined. The British royal protocol was more than just a set of behavioral norms. It was a form of personality, and Diana now had to conform to that personality. She was coached by palace advisors, trainers, and protocol officers providing nobility training. How a royal bride walks, how she shakes hands, how much she bows her head, what colors she wears and when. All of it was taught to her step by step. Diana would summarize this period years later in one sentence. "Suddenly, my whole self was taken from my hands and a role was given in its place." To be a member of the royal family, academic qualification was not necessary, but the ability to hide emotions was essential. Emotions should not be shown to the public. A princess should not cry, should not show her anger, should control her laughter. And Diana, a shy but sincere young woman who grew up among the people, was now being thrust into centuries-old traditions. Throughout history, every bride in the English monarchy received this training, but none had felt this alone at such a young age. The inside of the palace was silent, but the streets were cheerful. Diana was not yet married. She hadn't received her title yet, but the public had already declared her the princess of their hearts. People saw hope in that face in the newspapers when the engagement was first announced. Her shy gaze, her bowed head, her modest smile. It was nothing like the usual cold expression of the royal family. They loved her at first sight, and they did not hide that love. Elderly women who came up to her in the street, children who pressed flowers into her hands. It was as if she had emerged from among them, like one of us. For the first time in a long time, the people of England felt this close to the palace, and it was Diana, not Charles, who provided this closeness. When they looked at her, they saw sincerity, not fame. People likened Diana to their own mother, their sister themselves, and even before she wore her wedding dress, before she stepped through the palace gates, her place in the public's heart was already ready. That love first carried Diana, then tried to protect her. But in the end, that love shattered against the cold walls of the palace. It is claimed that the prince was bothered by Diana being more popular and loved than him, and that was the reason for some problems that would arise in the future. The engagement period, viewed from the outside, was like a fairy tale. But behind the curtain, Diana's world was slowly cracking. A box she found by chance one day changed everything for her. Inside the box was a bracelet engraved with the letters C and F, Gladys and Fred, the nicknames Charles and Camilla used for each other. When Diana asked Charles about this bracelet, the answer she received was cold. "She is just a friend." But Diana felt the truth. This gift showed that Charles's heart still belonged to Camilla. This discovery nourished the seeds of distrust within Diana. She was not yet married, but she felt that her marriage was being shared with a third person, and this feeling was the harbinger of the storms that would occur in the coming years. London, 1981. There is a flurry of preparation behind the high walls of the palace. The wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer is approaching, a ceremony shaped under the shadow of centuries-old traditions, protocols, and rules. The date was set, July 29, 1981. The venue was unusual, St. Paul's Cathedral, whereas royal weddings were usually held at Westminster Abbey. But St. Paul had a larger capacity, and that meant more guests. Furthermore, Diana's aristocratic background made this choice even more significant. 3,500 guests, heads of state, royal families, diplomats, each one was meticulously placed according to their order of importance. The seating arrangement strictly adhered to protocol rules, the highest-ranking guests in the front and the other guests towards the back. Diana's wedding dress was designed by British designers David and Elizabeth Emanuel. However, according to royal tradition, the wedding dress design was submitted for the Queen's approval. The Queen examined the details of the dress and gave her approval. This is a strict rule in royal weddings. The wedding dress cannot be a design that the Queen does not like. Diana's wedding bouquet traditionally contained a sprig of myrtle. This tradition dates back to Queen Victoria's wedding. The myrtle sprig is considered a symbol of love and marriage. The wedding cake was prepared with ingredients such as raisins, ground almonds, cherries, and marzipan, and was traditionally cut with the groom's ceremonial sword. This ritual is an indispensable part of royal weddings. The wedding preparations were the focus of the world media, newspapers, televisions, radios. Everyone was talking about this fairy tale. Diana's shy demeanor, Charles's serious posture. Every detail was carried to the headlines. A different atmosphere prevailed inside the palace. Centuries-old procedures worked like a clock. Everything was meticulously planned. But in this order, Diana's young and inexperienced soul sometimes got lost. The London morning was gray, but the squares were bright. Even before 8 o'clock, hundreds of thousands of people poured into the streets. Flags, flowers, babies. Diana's name was everywhere. It was the wedding day. It was the biggest media event of an era. The streets along the route to St. Paul's Cathedral were barricaded. People had taken their places before dawn. Some had spent the night on the sidewalk with their blankets. Some whispered to their children on their shoulders. You'll tell the story one day. Millions of people watched on television. The whole world was live broadcasting. That day, approximately 750 million people were glued to the screen. No sports event, political summit, or concert had brought so many people together at once. And then the royal carriage stopped in front of St. Paul's. A young woman got out of it. The wedding dress was enormous, ivory-colored satin, an 8-meter veil, a body that seemed lost inside it. But as she walked, her feet seemed to know where they were stepping. Diana. She was walking with an infinity in her eyes, a trembling courage in her hands. As she climbed the cathedral stairs, it was not the steps, but the rest of her life that seemed to be waiting for her. Above, Charles was inside, standing in his uniform, calm, controlled, loyal to the protocol. In the ceremony, handshakes, vows, and the applause of the public. And the expected moment came. "I do," they said. But Diana forgot to say all of Charles's names in the correct order. It was a small but symbolic mistake for the palace. For many, it was a sign overflowing from the subconscious. At that moment, a fairy tale seemed to be completed. But in fact, that day, not a ceremony, but a loneliness also began. Outside, millions were rejoicing, but inside, someone was slowly closing in on herself. She thought everything would change when the palace gates opened. But what really happened was that Diana slowly began to lose herself. Her first days in the royal family were sparkling, magnificent, but silent. And in that silence, no one asked her, "How are you, Diana?" In the palace, everything had a place, a time, a rule. Which floor she would wake up on, which teacup she would use, on which day she would bow before whom, everything was predetermined. But there was no meaning written for Diana. The Queen was strictly attached to traditions. She was cool-headed. Formality was her language. Diana's emotionality, sincerity, even her laughter seemed too much, and this excess was not welcomed. Charles was polite at first, but with time he became distant. It was as if he was becoming colder, more distant, more closed off every day. In Diana's words, "There was no love in that marriage for me, no support, no understanding at all." Inside the palace, there were only footsteps, not heartbeats. The loneliness was noiseless, but its internal echo was growing. One morning, Diana looked in the mirror and said she didn't recognize herself. There was a face that complied with the wishes of others, but was completely alienated from herself, and she continued to walk with that face, to ceremonies, to greetings, as if she were a window figure. Diana, years later, summarized the feeling inside her with a single sentence. "I woke up one morning and said, 'No one truly smudgedy understands me.'" Every sound heard around her was actually the sound of a system, and Diana had begun to break within that system. Prince Charles was a mysterious and distant figure. He grew up in the shadow of traditions and had learned to hide his emotions. According to Diana, he had difficulty expressing his emotions. Sometimes it was impossible to understand what he was thinking. Charles struggled to form emotional bonds under the weight of his responsibilities. His failure to reciprocate Diana's romantic gestures further deepened the distance between them. According to Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler, Diana would send Charles romantic cards, but he would never reciprocate. He didn't have a romantic bone in his body. Charles's introverted and distant nature clashed with Diana's emotional needs. This incompatibility deepened the cracks at the foundation of their marriage. Diana said in the 1995 BBC Panorama interview, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." Diana finally found the warmth she sought among the kitchen staff of the palace. The palace chef, Darren McGrady, recounts, "The princess would come down to the kitchen, walk down the stairs and say, 'Hello, Darren.' It was wonderful." Diana would go down to the kitchen and chat with the chefs. She knew their names. She shared their troubles. This behavior was contrary to the traditional structure of the palace. However, her sincere interest in people warmed the cold walls of the palace. Diana's naturalness made some people inside the palace uncomfortable. This behavior, which was unconventional for royalty, made her special once again in the eyes of the public. One morning, a test result, an emotion and a heartbeat reminded her of herself again. She was pregnant. She was expecting her first child. But even this news was not a joy for an expectant mother, but a matter of protocol for the palace. Its timing was questioned. Its announcement was planned. How would the news be given to the press? When would it be announced? Everything was under control, as if she was not a mother but a headline. Diana would later recount, "When I was pregnant, everyone was just talking about what it meant for the family. No one was asking how I felt." When the press received the news, the streets, the headlines, the televisions started talking about Diana. The Princess of Wales is becoming a mother. But for Diana, this was not an escape. Because Charles's behavior had not changed. Camilla was still there, and Diana was growing her own inner loneliness along with the life she was carrying. While pregnant with Prince William, Diana experienced a severe mental breakdown. The media's attention, the palace's pressure, Charles's distance all combined, and one morning she opened the window and looked down. In the Panorama interview, she would describe that moment. "I just wanted to attract attention. I didn't want to die, but I also wanted help." The palace did not understand the depression she was experiencing. Diana felt alone and worthless during the first months of her pregnancy. Eating disorders began, and no one wondered why. But the life growing inside her gave her a new purpose, a new connection, a new strength, and that day came. June 21, 1982, St. Mary's Hospital, Lindo Wing. The press had waited in front of the building until morning. England was eagerly waiting, and that morning, a new life appeared in Diana's hands, Prince William Arthur Philip Louis. The public welcomed this birth like a miracle. But for Diana, this was not just the birth of a title, but the birth of her own existence again. For the first time, she felt like she was the center of her life. For the first time, someone would love her sincerely and unconditionally. And for the first time, she felt compelled to stay strong for another human being. But even at that moment, the distance between her and Charles did not change. Immediately after the prince's birth, Charles stayed at the hospital for only a short time and then left for a polo match. Diana would later describe that moment. A few hours after giving birth to our son, Charles left me at the hospital and went to play polo. That's when I felt something break inside me forever. William was born, but Charles's attention was still scattered. He was still giving gifts to Camilla and continued to meet with her. Diana, on the other hand, made a promise to herself. She would raise William like a human being, not a palace child. She considered love, attention, and touch much more valuable than the guards in front of him and the thrones behind him. Diana began to rewrite the palace rules. She took William to school herself on his first day. This was something no princess had ever done before, because motherhood in the royal family was mostly managed by nannies, educators, and procedures. But Diana defined her own motherhood. My children come before everything, even royal duties. Sometime after William was born, Diana was pregnant again. This time Harry was coming, September 15th, 1984. Diana became a mother for the second time. The newborn baby was named Henry Charles Albert David, but the public always knew him as Harry. He was a red-haired, smiling, curious baby. He instantly settled in Diana's heart. But the first few minutes in the delivery room were the beginning of an indescribable disappointment for Diana. Charles looked at the baby. With a slight smile, he said, "Oh, a boy, and he's red-haired." At that moment, Diana's heart felt frozen, because Charles had hoped the second baby would be a girl. But the real sting was the red hair comment, because this was a trait that came from Diana's family. So that sentence was not a simple joke, it felt like an accusation. Diana later described that moment. It was a disappointment for him. And for me, it was very painful, because Harry was exactly the child I needed. When Diana first held Harry in her arms, she felt the emptiness inside her fill up a little. But the chasm between her and Charles had grown too large to ever be closed. From that moment on, Diana became more attached to her sons. Although it was considered contrary to the palace traditions, she began to feed them herself, put them to bed, and even go to the amusement park with them, because they were the only real connection she had in her life. Diana had a complex relationship with her mother-in-law, Queen Elizabeth. When she first stepped into the palace, the Queen displayed a cautious but positive approach towards her. A young aristocratic bride, she was loved by the public, attracting the attention of the media. But how much this interest and energy would conform to the palace protocol was uncertain from the start. Over time, as Diana became lonelier in her marriage, she turned her eyes to this woman who was the age of her mother-in-law, the Queen. She needed support, understanding, a kind of trust, but what she found was often only silence. According to what she recounted years later, she saw the Queen as someone to be respected, but she also described her as difficult to approach and someone who did not show her emotions. On one occasion, when she asked for help regarding her marriage, the response she received was only a tense silence that lasted a few minutes. While her marriage was faltering, Diana was also fighting a silent war in her body, bulimia nervosa, a type of eating disorder. The palace initially ignored it. To suppress the emotional collapse and feeling of worthlessness she was experiencing, Diana had started having several eating binges and subsequent vomiting sessions a day. Here is the continuation of the translated transcript, with all timestamps and the word music removed, maintaining the same length, tone, and structure. She would later recount that period. This illness was an external reflection of the scream inside me. I wanted someone to hug me, but no one did. What the Queen thought about this, we learn again from Diana's own words. According to her, the royal circle saw Diana's bulimia as a weakness, or even a way of causing trouble. According to some comments, the Queen viewed this situation as a factor that ruined the marriage. But for Diana, the real issue was the exact opposite. Bulimia did not ruin the marriage. The marriage ruining me brought on the bulimia. It cannot be said that the Queen ever openly displayed a hostile attitude towards Diana, but in most accounts the relationship between them resembled neither a mother-daughter bond nor sincere female solidarity. While things were breaking down, no one knew exactly what to do, and at least according to Diana, the Queen did nothing. Diana had won the public's affection with her elegance and compassion. However, Media attention became both a blessing and a curse in her life. Diana was forced to make strategic moves at times to cope with the media's intense interest. According to claims by journalist Tina Brown, Diana did what many women whose relationships with their husbands were not going well did. She used her eldest son as a kind of buffer. She sometimes took William to her meetings with journalists. This caused the boundary between her and the journalists to disappear. Diana's relationship with the media also affected her private life. So much so that some sources suggested that she tried to convey certain messages by using the media. Again, according to Tina Brown's claims, Diana later used the press to make certain men in her life jealous. The intense media interest deeply affected Diana's life. So much so that some sources suggest this interest contributed to her tragic end. Prince Harry's statement, "Our mother was an incredible woman who dedicated her life to serving people. She was resilient, brave, and undeniably honest." The ripple effect of a culture of exploitation and unethical practices ultimately took her life. Princess Diana's relationship with the media was both her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. This complex relationship shaped many aspects of her life and eventually contributed to her tragic end. Princess Diana was also known for her deep human sensibility. Her compassion extended to the most vulnerable segments of society, and this resonated worldwide. In 1987, Diana met with AIDS patients at a London hospital. At that time, many misconceptions and prejudices prevailed about AIDS. Diana held the hand of an AIDS patient, showing that the disease was not spread through touch, and she tried to break down societal fears. This brave action created a great stir in society and contributed to changing the perspective towards the patients. In 1997, Diana visited the minefields in Angola. She drew attention to the dangers of landmines by walking through the mined area wearing a protective vest and visor. This visit provided great support for campaigns to ban landmines globally and helped bring the issue to the international agenda. She actively participated in projects for homeless youth. She collaborated with organizations that provided them with food, shelter, and support, drawing attention to this segment of society. She also regularly visited children's hospitals and orphanages, making efforts to improve the living conditions of children. Known for her interest in the arts, Diana provided scholarships for art students and sponsored various exhibitions and concerts. She helped break down prejudices in this field by emphasizing the importance of art in society. Princess Diana's humanitarian work led her to be known as the People's Princess. Her compassion and sensitivity inspired millions of people worldwide and changed the royal family's perspective on charitable activities. In addition to being a member of the royal family, Diana, known for her sincerity and genuine nature, led her to form close friendships with many famous figures. Diana had a close friendship with Freddie Mercury, the legendary vocalist of the Queen Band. Despite their busy schedules, they enjoyed spending time together. Elton John was one of Diana's close friends. Following Diana's death, Elton John rearranged and performed his song, "Candle in the Wind," in her memory. She also met the King of Pop, Michael Jackson. The two met at various events and had sincere conversations. Diana greatly admired Michael Jackson's. Years ago, her soul had been shaken by a phone call. Then with a bracelet, all her suspicions had turned into reality. There was no longer any point in denying the bond between Charles and Camilla, and Diana would no longer live this loneliness only inside. Because she had a lot to say. But there was no one in the palace who would listen, so she chose someone else. A journalist. The year was 1991. Diana was now full enough to talk, but she couldn't appear in a television interview. The palace wouldn't allow it. She couldn't speak in public, image, title, protocol. But she still spoke. With a microphone, a cassette, and a journalist. The journalist's name was Andrew Morton. But at the time, no one knew that Diana was communicating directly, because there was an intermediary between them, Dr. James Colthurst, Diana's close friend, a trusted person. He carried the cassettes. Diana would sit in Kensington Palace. She would record her answers on tapes. James Colthurst delivered these tapes to Morton. Everything was secret, but the words were virtually explosive. On the cassettes, Diana spoke with complete frankness about Charles's relationship with Camilla, her own emotional breakdown, her battle with bulimia, and her loneliness inside the palace. I felt worthless. Vomiting was the only thing I controlled. No one in the palace knew what I was going through. They didn't want to know either. The book was published in 1992. The title was Diana, Her True Story. But the real bomb was this. Everyone thought the book was written by third parties, but in reality, Diana's voice was in every sentence. Every line had poured out from within her. The book shook the British public. Cracks appeared in the flawless image of the royal family. The public was in shock, but at the same time, they were getting to know Diana this closely for the first time. And perhaps Diana, too, had become the narrator of her own story for the first time. The book was published in the summer of 1992. The then Prime Minister of England, John Major, stood up in Parliament in December and uttered the sentence that went down in history. The Prince and Princess of Wales have announced to the public that they have separated amicably. This was now an official state matter. Charles and Diana were still married, but they were living separate lives, and the public now officially knew this. Still, the divorce did not come immediately, because this divorce was one of the biggest fractures in the history of the royal family. 2 more years passed, and in 1994, it was Charles's turn. That year, in a television documentary prepared by the journalist Jonathan Dimbleby, Charles admitted his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles for the first time. The question was clear. Were you faithful to your wife throughout your marriage? After a brief pause, Charles gave this answer. Yes, to the best of my ability. But after the marriage hopelessly collapsed, the fidelity did not continue. These words created a bombshell effect in England. Because in the royal family, fidelity was more than just morality. It was a symbolic obligation. And now what Diana had said was also officially confirmed. That night, televisions, newspapers, the world media, all wrote the same thing. This marriage was now over. Diana would make her own move in response to Charles's confession in 1995. But that event would be a separate earthquake. Until that day, everyone had talked about Diana. Palace spokesmen, press consultants, newspapers, commentators. But now it was Diana's turn to speak. She herself, looking directly into the eyes of the public, spoke to her people and the entire world on the BBC's Panorama program. The broadcast was planned in secret. The Queen and even a large part of the BBC management did not even know about it. And that evening, millions of people were glued to their screens. Diana did not only tell her life story, she also voiced a conscience that had remained silent against the monarchy. There were 3 of us in this marriage. That's why it was a bit crowded. Diana spoke with open sincerity throughout the interview. Charles's relationship with Camilla, the loneliness she experienced, her bulimia, her failure to receive support in the palace, being harassed by the media, and how she took on the responsibility of motherhood alone. In another segment, she said, "I am not interested in the crown. I am interested in the place in the hearts of the people." After that night, nothing would ever be the same. For the royal family, this interview was considered a betrayal. The palace was not prepared for this move, but the public seemed to be expecting it. Diana's Panorama interview both gave her great power and made her even lonelier, because a woman who now spoke the truth was starting to be left out of the system, and very soon, the Queen made her decision. In 1995, the people of England were already shaken by Princess Diana's sensational interview on the BBC Panorama program. However, these statements also seriously damaged the reputation of the British monarchy. Queen Elizabeth II could not remain silent any longer in the face of these developments. In December 1995, she offered a recommendation to both Prince Charles and Princess Diana to formally end their marriage. This was a decision taken to prevent internal matters of the royal family from being further discussed in public and to protect the monarchy's reputation. The Queen has given Prince and Princess of Wales strong advice to bring their marriage to an early conclusion. This statement resonated widely in the British press. Newspapers informed their readers of this decision with headlines such as "Queen's Historic Intervention" and "Monarchy's Move to Protect Itself." The Times described the Queen's step as a difficult but necessary intervention, while The Guardian stressed that the decision was a critical turning point for the future of the monarchy. Financial arrangements, whether titles would be preserved and the custody of the children, were widely discussed in the press. Finally, on August 28, 1996, the couple's divorce was officially finalized. This divorce marked a significant turning point in the history of the British royal family and was recorded as a remarkable event in the monarchy's modernization process. With the formalization of the divorce in 1996, Diana was no longer an official member of the royal family. However, this did not diminish her commitment to public service. On the contrary, it allowed her to establish her own independent mission. In 1995, the BBC Panorama interview had aired. The world had heard Diana's inner voice. But that voice had also touched the heart of a man. That man was a heart surgeon of Pakistani origin. He worked at the Royal Brompton Hospital in London. His name was Hasnat Khan. Diana first saw him during a hospital visit. He was standing in the corner in his white coat. Diana found him to be very serious, very quiet, but trustworthy right away. Their relationship started in secret. Under the pretext of hospital visits, Diana entered that door many times. But this time, the purpose was not a camera, a ceremony, or a press release. "This was the purest bond of my life," said Diana's close friend, Simone Simmons, as recounted. Hasnat hated the media. He wanted a simple life. And Diana, despite her entire glamorous world, wanted to fit into his simple life. So much so that Diana went to Pakistan and even met Hasnat's family. She considered marrying him. She even sought ways to start a new life with him outside London. However, that life did not fit into this world. Hasnat knew that if he were with Diana, he would lose his profession and his privacy, and one day their relationship quietly ended. Perhaps this was the most special but least heard of love in Diana's life. It did not make headlines, nor were there any posed photos. It was just lived. It was the summer of 1997. For the first time in Diana's life, there were no official duties. Her royal title was gone. The protocol was over. The shadow of the palace was no longer on her back, but the media was still there. That summer, Princess Diana was looking for a breath of fresh air and found this breath on the shores of the Mediterranean. His name was Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed, a film producer, secret, calm, but someone who came from within the splendor. In fact, their acquaintance dated back a long time. Dodi was the person who invited Charles and Diana to Wimbledon, the world's oldest and most prestigious tennis tournament, in 1986. However, the romantic relationship began years later in the summer of 1997. While Diana was vacationing with her children at Mohammed Al Fayed's villa in Saint-Tropez, Dodi was also invited to the same house. The family friendship evolved into a special closeness this time. The summer she spent with Dodi was the time Diana was most photographed, but perhaps least talked about. Among the images distributed to the press, one of them made history. That famous frame taken by the Italian photographer Mario Brenna. Dodi and Diana kissing on the deck of the boat. Newspapers headlined this photo. "Lucky Dodi, the People's Princess's new love." She was no longer just the mother of William and Harry. But there was more behind the scenes. As we mentioned earlier, according to some sources, Diana knowingly allowed this photograph to reach the press, because her mind was still on another man at the time, Hasnat Khan. Did she send a message to Hasnat with this relationship, or had she truly turned a new page? No one will know for sure. But one thing was certain. Diana was finally acting like her own person, not like the former princess of the palace. The summer was progressing. Photographs multiplied, headlines grew larger. But no one knew. The storm that came at the end of that summer would shake the whole world. That summer, time was flowing on a different calendar for Diana. Despite losing her title and leaving the palace, her life had never attracted so much attention. She embarked on a journey across the Mediterranean with Dodi. Sardinia, Corsica, Monte Carlo, Capri. In those days, Prince Charles was meeting with Camilla Parker Bowles in secret but regularly. Camilla had recently been involved in a traffic accident. Charles still had not made a public statement, but everyone knew. Diana's photographs were also a declaration of defiance. The children were now at Balmoral, the Queen's summer residence in Scotland. William and Harry had spent time with their mother, then gone to their father for the traditional holiday. Would Diana see her children again? She didn't know either. But in the last letters she sent them, she said, "We'll see each other again soon." And then, the last days of August. Diana decided to go to Paris with Dodi. A brief night, perhaps a few hours of escape, and the plan to return to London the next morning. But fate would not wait that long, and Paris would no longer be the city of a love affair, but a city of a farewell. Death has neither a time nor mercy, neither a warning nor an explanation. Sometimes a person is approaching the most beautiful days of their life. After years of storms, they have finally reached a point where they can see the sun. Their wounds have scabbed over, their voice has returned to its own. The photographs where she smiles are no longer a pose, but true happiness. And just at that moment, death snatches her from the highest point. Ruthlessly, suddenly, with a break that seems to come from within the silence. That night was such a moment for Diana. August 30th, 1997. Paris was preparing to emerge from summer, but two people looking out from a hotel window were just opening up to each other. Diana and Dodi. When the two landed in Paris on a private jet from Sardinia, there were paparazzi even on the runway of Le Bourget Airport. They were close enough to record their landing, their posture, their steps, and even how they looked at each other. Their plan was simple: a quiet night in Paris, a stylish dinner. The place to go was a classic French restaurant called Chez Benoit, but their plans were ruined. According to witness statements, the crowd of press waiting in front of the restaurant made Diana uneasy. Her private staff and security officers would later describe this moment. Diana was disturbed when she saw the crowd. She just turned to Dodi and quietly said, "They're too many. They won't leave us alone here either." Witness was the hotel's assistant head of security. The account is via People and Friends 24. Following this, Dodi suggested returning to the Ritz Hotel, which belonged to his father, Mohammed Al-Fayed. It was the only place where they could control everything, and the Imperial Suite on the top floor was for them that night. 10 p.m. A simple dinner in the Imperial Suite. Diana had mushrooms and asparagus, then sole fish. Dodi ordered turbot. The attendant who served the meal to the room stated that Diana looked calm but restless. The curtains in the room were drawn, but Paris was bustling behind the glass. Paparazzi were stationed in front of the hotel. Some were hidden on the hoods of cars, some inside trash bins. Diana was used to this attention, but she was weary. After dinner, a few phone calls, and then the decision not to end the night there. This time they would go out, but without attracting attention. The plan was set up based on witness statements as follows. First, another car was driven out of the main entrance of the Ritz. It was hoped that the paparazzi would chase it. This was a decoy, the last tactic played in the darkness of the night. But fate was entering through the back door. At the same time, Diana and Dodi would leave through the back exit. In the driver's seat was the hotel's assistant security manager, Henri Paul. In the front passenger seat was Dodi's bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones. In the back seat, Diana and Dodi. However, the paparazzi were experienced. No one should have expected a back exit to remain empty. 00:20 a.m. The car left the back exit of the Ritz on the Rue Cambon. A black Mercedes S280 with 4 people inside, 8 motorcycles outside, 2 cars, and no one was thinking of slowing down anymore. A short time before setting off, there was a faint smile on Diana's lips. According to the waiter at the hotel, there was a gentle but distant look on her face. They were heading towards the heart of Paris. They were silent, but this silence was only inside the glass, because even at the moment they drove out of the back exit, a few paparazzi had already spotted them. They jumped onto their motorcycles. Radio conversations began. News agencies were awake. One more shot, one more flash, perhaps a fortune. The car started to speed up. Henri Paul drove towards Place de la Concorde. They passed the square, then the Quai des Tuileries, and then the Courbet. But the distance between them never closed. The paparazzi were right on their heels with their motorcycles. Some overtook, some cut lanes. The driver pressed harder and harder. Diana turned back once. Those who saw those moments said there was something in her eyes. Unease, but also tiredness, perhaps an acceptance. And then, entering the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, a dark opening on the banks of the Seine in the center of Paris. The car entered the tunnel quickly, and a chilling crash was heard. Once the quiet woman loved by the cameras was now moving toward an eternal silence. When the paparazzi arriving on motorcycles entered the tunnel, they could not immediately understand what they were seeing. But a few meters later, they stopped. Lights hit their faces. A car was smashed to pieces. The roof was crushed. The windows were shattered. The headlights were still on. Some hesitated. Some reflexively reached for their cameras. Some were still trying to take pictures. But there was no pose there anymore. There was only shattered humanity. Minutes later, the first crews from the Paris Fire Department arrived. There was one name among them: Xavier Gourmelon. Gourmelon saw a woman in the back seat. She was still alive. She was conscious. She was moving slightly. He held her carefully. He slowly leaned down. He felt her heart still beating. And then the woman said in a whisper-like voice, "My God, what happened?" These were Diana's known last words. Trevor Rees-Jones was seriously injured. Henri Paul and Dodi had died at the scene, but Diana was breathing. The ambulance arrived and she was taken inside. The sound of the siren echoed through the streets of the Paris night. Bad news travels fast, especially if the person caught by death had touched so many hearts. If she was engraved in the hearts and minds of so many children, mothers, and patients, death slowly took Diana's life that night. Diana was taken by ambulance to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. Her heart had stopped, but the doctors did not give up. There was no way left that they did not try to bring her back to life. Long-term cardiac massage was performed. Her pulse returned a few times, but internal bleeding, chest trauma, and most importantly, a ruptured heart vessel. Around 4 a.m., the official statement came: Diana, Princess of Wales, has lost her life. The air was still dark in Paris, but another darkness had settled over the city. Le Monde published an emergency edition: Diana killed in fatal Paris accident. Le Figaro: the tragic end of Princess Diana. Paris match: a princess is dead. The area in front of the Ritz Hotel turned into a memorial garden within hours. Flowers, candles, letters. People who had never met her were bidding farewell to a woman. A crowd felt orphaned. The news first reached London from France. Then, within minutes, the whole world. London woke up cold that morning, but this time it was not the cold air, but a chill that came from within. The Times: the death of Diana, the heart of the nation is broken. The Guardian: Princess Diana dies in traffic accident. And the first official statement was made by British Prime Minister Tony Blair: "We have lost the people's princess. Our hearts are with her family, her children. A nation is now mourning." That day, the world was a little quieter. Radios did not play. Televisions cut entertainment programs. Church bells rang. Newspapers were filled with early editions, and people silently wept for a woman. It was as if a belief, a hope, a bond had also disappeared with her. The BBC broadcast stopped. Anchors changed their ties. Programs were cut, and then the streets began to fill. The people of London were going to mourn. People started gathering in front of Buckingham Palace. In their hands were flowers, letters. Some were just holding their hands tightly, as if by holding on, they would not have lost Diana. As the hours passed, a sea-like crowd gathered in front of the palace. Roses, lilies, letters. One sentence written by a child was not forgotten: "I never knew you, but I will miss you so much." But the palace curtains were closed. The windows were darkened. The flag was not lowered. No statement was coming. The silence lengthened, and this silence made the pain even heavier. William and Harry were in Balmoral at the time. That morning, it was not their father, but a palace official who told them that Diana had died. William was 15, Harry was 12. The public was crying, the streets were crying, but the palace was just silent. Perhaps habit, perhaps protocol. But that morning, everyone thought this: Diana was never wanted in the palace, and now it seems they don't even want to remember her in death. Eyes, ears, expectations were on the palace. Thousands of people were in front of the iron gates of Buckingham Palace. But still, no sound was coming from inside. Neither was the flag flown at half-mast, nor was a flower placed, nor was a note of condolence shared. Televisions asked the same question every hour. Where is the Queen? Newspapers ran screaming headlines. The public has spoken. The Queen is still silent. Daily Mail. Where is the conscience? The Independent. Even BBC anchors put aside their usual respect and said, the British public now most wants to hear from the Queen. Did we love Princess Diana? Were we proud of her? And most of all, did we deserve her? Queen Elizabeth was in Balmoral during this period. Yes, she was with her grandchildren, William and Harry, but the rest of the country was left with an emotional leadership vacuum. The Queen, known for keeping her emotions hidden for years, now had to do something. Stop being silent. And history was written. September 5th, 1997, 6 p.m. Live broadcast, the entire country in front of their screens. The Queen stood before the cameras in front of Buckingham Palace. The flag behind her was finally flown at half-mast, and she spoke. I speak to you as a grandmother, as a mother, and as your Queen, and as someone who has known Princess Diana personally. Diana was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. These words were recorded as one of the greatest moments of fracture in the history of the British monarchy. The Queen may not have shown all her emotions, but for the first time, she had opened a door to the hearts of the public. But for Diana, this was an apology that came too late. A thank you, perhaps a farewell, but things she never heard while she was alive. On the morning of September 6, 1997, there was a gray sky over London. But the real gloom was in people's hearts. Millions poured into the streets to bid farewell to Princess Diana. The funeral cortege set off from Kensington Palace. The coffin, draped in the British flag, was on a gun carriage drawn by black horses. On the coffin was a floral arrangement of white lilies and two small cards. One read, Mummy, a farewell from the hearts of William and Harry. 5 figures walked behind the coffin: Prince Charles, Prince William, Prince Harry, Prince Philip, and Earl Spencer, Diana's brother. The 2 young princes walked silently behind their mother, under the gaze of millions. The streets of London were filled with flowers, notes, and portraits of Diana. People watched the passage of the coffin silently, with tears in their eyes. Some whispered, "Goodbye, People's Princess." The ceremony at Westminster Abbey was watched by approximately 2.5 billion people worldwide. Inside, Elton John performed "Candle in the Wind," which he had specially adapted for Diana. The lyrics of the song now told of the farewell of a legend, not a princess. Following the ceremony, Diana's body was taken to the family burial ground at Althorpe Estate. There, on an island in the middle of a lake, she was laid to eternal rest. They say, the most beautiful legacy to leave behind in life is a pure name and the hearts you have touched. Princess Diana achieved both. She was seen in hospitals more than in palaces. She did not rule like queens. She hugged like mothers. Every visit she made, every room she entered, every hand she held, made a person feel seen for the first time. She may no longer have been officially the Princess of Wales, but she remained the Princess of Hearts, and after her death, this legacy did not disappear. It grew, took root, and lived on. Today, there are hundreds of charities bearing her name. The Diana Award supports young leaders. The Diana Memorial Fund fights for social justice. The windows Diana opened are still open, and the most vivid legacy she left behind is her 2 sons, William and Harry, who have tried to walk the path their mother opened. Diana remained a compass in the hearts of both of them. Harry said in an interview, "I talk to her every day. I never lost my connection with her." If a person is still missed years after their death, still spoken about, and still causes a lump in the throat when their name is heard, they have truly lived fully. Princess Diana may not have lived an easy life, but she left a great mark. And this mark continues to guide whenever a heart feels broken.